story of 5 young men who did an admittedly stupid thing. They broke into what they thought was an empty home, and one of them ended up dead. But critics say what happened next was an injustice. The boys were charged and convicted of felony murder, even though none of them pulled the trigger. My Nightline co-anchor Juju Chang has been following this case for years, and tonight she's right there for major new developments.
Oh my gosh. I don't want him sitting there another minute.
For April Erdos, the drive to Wabash Prison is one she knows far too well.
3 years, 3 months, and some odd days.
The many long days this mother's been fighting for the freedom of her 20-year-old son, Levi.
You really can't explain what it feels like. It just comes down to the love you have for your child. That's what makes it hurt so bad.
Levi was sentenced to 50 years in prison for felony murder, even though he didn't pull the trigger. He didn't even have a gun.
I just want to see his face. That's going to be a Kodak moment right there.
More than 250 miles away in Elkhart, Indiana, Levi's life was forever changed on a fall day in 2012. He was hanging out with 4 of his friends, among them 21-year-old Danzelle Johnson and 16-year-old Blake Laymon.
I got off school that day, we ended up talking, coming up with dumbass plan, excuse my language.
The plan was to rob an empty house.
Why an empty house?
It was just a plan to get quick money. It was never a plan to hurt anyone or, to even confront anyone.
Were any of you armed?
No.
They settled on this house just across the street.
You're convinced nobody's inside?
We had knocked beforehand, and I mean knocked, like not just run the doorbell, we knocked.
While the other 4 teens entered the house they thought was empty, Levi stayed behind on the porch as a lookout.
At that point, you didn't say, hey, this is a bad idea?
I could have, but no, I didn't.
There was a boom, and my whole house shook.
This is the testimony of Rodney Scott, the homeowner. Turns out he was home, upstairs, taking a nap.
Fear comes over you, and you don't know if you're going to get hurt or if you're going to get killed. That's when I decided that I was going to fire my gun and try to trap them.
I heard a bang, and then I heard another bang, and then I heard a couple more bangs afterwards.
Turn around and run away from the gun. I felt something warm. I came up with a handful of blood.
That's when you realized
That's when I realized
shot in the
I'd
leg.
shot. That's the out.
That's the out, and the entry wound is there.
And then Blake realized something else. His friend Danzelle was slumped next to him, shot in the chest, bleeding heavily.
He died in your arms?
He died in between, like right in between me and Jose. I remember screaming, "I'm sorry," and just over and over again.
To whom were you sorry?
The homeowner, I was sorry, period. It was a bad situation. I was sorry for it all.
Levi says his friends then called him into the house for help.
I just stepped inside that doorway, having to look over, and the guy was holding the gun at me. And I threw my hands up, and he was there, told me to get out of his house, and I said, "I'm sorry," and I took off.
And 1 week later,
They called me and said that he had been arrested for murder.
that's right, murder, felony murder. Because when someone's killed during certain crimes, in this case burglary, everyone committing that crime can be held responsible, even though none of them pulled the trigger or even had a gun. Even Levi, who was just the lookout.
I didn't really comprehend it. I didn't put my mind around what I was really about to go through.
The point of the felony murder law is basically to say, you bring a gun to a robbery and someone ends up getting killed, well then you're going to be held responsible for that person's death. What makes this case different is that none of them had weapons, none of them were violent, and none of them killed anyone.
In this case, the homeowner, Rodney Scott, the man who pulled the trigger, was never charged with wrongdoing. Scott was so haunted by what happened there, he never lived in the house again. One of the 4, 16-year-old Jose Quiroz, took a plea bargain. But the other 3 teenagers, with no history of violent crime, decided to stand trial, placing their fate in the hands of a jury.
What is your thought on how fair or not this charge is?
To me, we all should be charged for what we done that day, but nobody committed murder, so why should we be charged with it?
I committed burglary, Serious things did happen. Danzelle's gone, I mean, I'm not saying I don't deserve time.
The trial lasted just 4 days. The teenagers were all found guilty of an adult crime.
The decision was real hard for me. I'm still torn over it. I have a hard time talking about it, really.
17-year-old Levi was sentenced to 50 years in prison. 16-year-old Blake and 18-year-old Anthony Sharp each got 55 years.
I think it's insane. I think it's overkill. And I think it's unjust and needs to be remedied.
Their controversial sentences drew national attention, from Nancy Grace.
You've got a dead body.
To Dr. Phil.
Were these boys thugs?
No, not at all.
Their mothers mobilized, filing appeals to overturn what they believe to be unjust and cruel sentences.
We want to keep the word out. We want people not to forget about these boys that are locked up and need our support.
At the center of their appeals, that felony murder charge.
I think the argument of just a lay person is, well, those boys shouldn't have been committing burglary in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't disagree with that. Our point of contention is how much punishment they should receive and what they should be punished for.
The outraged moms insisting they would take the case all the way to the Supreme Court.
These kids aren't murderers, and they don't deserve to do 50, 55 years and all that for something they didn't do.
When we first visited the prison in 2014, Levi was 19, living on the adult side, separated from Blake, who's still a juvenile.
Show me your ink.
All right.
Let's see.
His time in prison literally etched on his skin, tattoos he illicitly got behind bars.
And the hourglass, it's broken. That would show that it's wasted time.
And that's your sentence,
Yeah,
50
it's my
years.
sentence. Being behind bars ain't nothing like being on the outs. This is constantly what we see every day.
It's depressing.
Horrible.
Okay.
And sometimes dangerous.
Fight?
Yeah.
While we're there, an alarm. There's an incident.
All traffic weapons team assembled. 31, K1.
I hate hearing that. Somebody's hurt. When you hear that tone ring out, it gives you chills because it could be you any day.
We find Blake over on the juvenile side of the prison.
209. This is your world, basically.
Yeah.
Blake is about to turn 18 and will soon join Levi on the adult side.
And I want to make a cake.
You're going to make a cake?
I'm actually going to clean this out and then just take like honey buns and stuff like that and squish them and making a layered cake.
You guys are worried about this new test, right?
Both teenagers still hold out hope that they'll be free soon enough to make studying for their GED pay off.
46 divided by 9. I'm trying as best as I can. I don't want to be the same person when I get out. I want to be a different person. All the stuff that I was doing out there, drinking, smoking, not doing good in school, ignoring my family for whatever they had to tell me, I don't want to go back to that same lifestyle.
For Blake and Levi, time stands still, while their mothers fight on the outside, fueled by the possibility of freedom.
Oh, my heart's a pounding.
A breakthrough when we come back.